welcome to part 2 of the van conversion diaries, and this time we're getting stuck into insulation. This is one of the most important parts of the whole build, but I'm doing it a bit differently to most of the van builds you'll see online. Stick around and I'll show you exactly what I'm using, how it goes together, and why I think it's a much better way to do it. We'll get things started with the floor. Here I'm using 18mm wood fibre board sheets. These are made from compressed wood fibres, usually a byproduct from sawmills, and they form a natural, breathable layer. The idea here isn't just to make a warm space, but a healthy one too. Most people think of PIR boards or other foams when it comes to insulation, and on paper they look brilliant, great thermal performance, lightweight, easy to cut. But what those figures don't tell you is that their performance drops over time, as the insulating gases inside slowly diffuse out and get replaced with air. So not only does their insulation value get worse, but those gases that escape go straight into your indoor environment. And that raises a few questions about what we're breathing in long term, especially in a small sealed space like a van. That's one of the main reasons I try to keep things natural. The thermal performance of materials like wood fibre might not look quite as good on paper, but it stays consistent, it helps regulate moisture, and it creates a much healthier environment to live in. Plus, at the end of its life, it's much easier to recycle, making it better for you and for the planet. These boards are tongue and grooved, so they slot together really nicely without leaving gaps where they butt up. I'm simply laying them straight on top of the existing plywood floor. Because the boards are quite dense, they create a solid sub-base for the final floor finish that will float on top later. That bit of density also helps deaden sound and absorb the vibration from every step, so it feels more stable and comfortable underfoot. The van's a fiberglass body on a steel frame, and the existing wall studs are only about 40mm deep. I'm planning to use 100mm of sheep's wool in the walls, so to make space for that, I'm boxing them out with 50mm studwork up to the window line. Fortunately, this van's pretty wide, so I'm happy to trade a little bit of interior width for some extra comfort. With the new studwork in place, I can start fitting the sheep's wool insulation. This stuff's really easy to work with. You can just tear it by hand to whatever size you need. The dog loves it. I'm using Thermofleece, which is made from 100% natural sheep's wool with a small amount of recycled fibre to hold it together. I love using sheep's wool insulation. It's safe to handle, no masks, no itching, and it naturally helps regulate humidity inside the van. It can absorb moisture when the air's damp and release it again when it's dry, which makes the space a lot more comfortable and helps cut down on condensation. These rolls are 570mm wide, so ideally you'd space your studs 600mm centre to centre for a nice snug fit, but I lined my timber studs up with the existing metal ones so I could fix them together, which means my spacing's more like 900mm. Fortunately, the wall's really forgiving and rips easily, so it's simple to size it up and fill every gap nice and tight. With all the studs now stuffed with insulation, I went back around and added a few more fixings to secure the studwork properly to the van. I'll be fully lining the inside of the van with this airtight membrane in the next video, but for now I'm just stapling it over the walls to help hold the insulation in place. Before moving on to the roof insulation, I've ripped down some OSB into narrow strips and fixed them to the fiberglass. That'll make it much easier to attach the insulation securely to the van. For the roof, I'm using 50mm of sheep's wool between the studs, and then a layer of wood fibre board on the inside. To hold the wool up while I work, I put a few small screws into the OSB battens and tied string between them. It's a simple trick, but it does the job and keeps the insulation in place until the boards go on. For the ceiling, I'm adding an extra layer of wood fibre board insulation on the inside. This not only insulates the ribs between the wool, preventing cold bridging, but it also holds the wool in place and gives me a solid surface to fix the airtight membrane to in the next video. Getting these boards up overhead is a bit awkward. They're not heavy, just big, so it's a challenge to get them in the right place and fix them to the battens so everything sits tight against the wall. I'm using a few temporary props to hold each sheet while I screw it in. Once they're up, the whole ceiling starts to feel a lot more solid, and you can really see the shape of the van coming together. It's one of those slow, fiddly jobs that makes a big difference once it's done. I'm using big washers to temporarily hold the boards up for now, just so they don't rip through around the screws. Eventually I'll take these back out so I can fix more OSB battens on the inside of the insulation. Those will tie back into the van's structural ribs, holding everything firmly in place and giving me a solid surface to fix the ceiling to. Now that the easy bits are done, I've got a load of awkward fiberglass and steel sections left places that aren't really worth boxing out just to squeeze in more insulation. Instead, I'm cutting the wood fiberboard to shape and fixing it directly onto them. It might not seem like a huge amount of insulation, but even a thin layer helps reduce heat loss through those cold spots. The fiberboard also acts as a bit of a thermal break, which stops the warm air inside the van from hitting those cold metal surfaces. That's what causes condensation and dripping in winter. So even these small areas make a big difference to comfort once the van's in use. You may have noticed that a big part of these walls is glass, which isn't great for thermal performance, but I'm a sucker for a good view and plenty of natural light, so the windows are all staying. For the dividing wall between the front and back of the van, I ended up making a few changes. I needed to adjust some of the studs to fit a window and leave space for a slide-out toilet in the future. The cab area is definitely the coldest part of the van, so I wanted to pack in 100mm of sheep's wool insulation here to help keep the warmth in the back. I only had 50mm timber to hand, and rather than stopping to buy more, I just doubled up the studs using what I had. It does the same job, keeps everything moving, and saves a bit of money in the process. This time, I built the studs at 600mm centers, so the insulation fits snugly between them. No cutting, no gaps, just a clean, simple fit. I'm using 100mm of sheep's wool again, which not only keeps the van warm, but also helps with soundproofing and humidity control. Wool can absorb up to a third of its own weight in moisture without feeling damp, which makes it perfect for a van where condensation is always a problem. It's one of those materials that just works sustainable, easy to handle, and it actually makes the space smell pretty good too. Here comes the supervisor, making sure I've got wool packed into all the last little nooks and crannies. Quality control's pretty strict on this job. Nothing gets past him. The van's starting to take shape now, fully insulated and starting to feel much more like a living space. That's it for this stage. The insulation's in and the van's finally feeling warm. If you're enjoying the build, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next step when I start fitting the airtight membrane.